My name is Elias Hart, United States Park Ranger, assigned to the Escalante District in Utah. I've worked this land for almost 22 years, long enough to learn when something doesn't belong, long enough to stop asking questions when you know no answer is coming. But this, what I'm going to tell you now, it doesn't fall into any category I've known. It doesn't fit inside the map of the natural world. And if I'm being honest, I don't know where the edge is anymore. I've always thought of the desert as honest. Brutal, yes, but honest. It shows you everything, every cracked bone, every storm-carved cliffside, every mistake left to bleach in the sun. But there are places out here where even the sun refuses to go. Pockets of silence that swallow sound and light. Canyons where your compass spins without reason. Places the locals don't mark on maps, don't name, don't walk near. When you've worn the badge as long as I have, you learn to listen to the land. But you also learn to listen to silence. And one winter, about 5 years ago, that silence changed. It started with a package, no return address, just a stained envelope left on the passenger seat of my patrol truck one morning in January. Inside was a cassette tape, an actual tape, cracked, unlabeled, and warped like it had been through heat. No fingerprints, no note, no sign of who left it. But taped to the back of it was a name, Dr. Alan Croft. Now that name meant something to me. Croft was a cultural anthropologist from the University of Colorado. Came through Escalante in 2011 asking strange questions about pre-colonial oral histories, not the usual skinwalker lore you get from tourists on ghost tours. He was after something else, something older, something the tribes themselves only referred to in symbols, if at all. He stayed about 3 months, then vanished. Some said he went back east. Others said he lost it, wandered off into the desert. But I saw the search reports. Dogs picked up his scent near an unmarked cave west of Devil's Backbone. Then, nothing. And now this tape shows up. Against every ounce of judgment I had, I listened to it. I found an old player in the station's break room and let it run. I should have burned it. But once I heard his voice, I knew it was real. Croft's voice on the tape was ragged, tired, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. The recording wasn't linear. It skipped, looped, broke apart. But certain phrases repeated again and again. The whispers aren't from the land. They're under it. They don't sleep. They wait. The desert doesn't remember them. It just hides them. And then, beneath all that, something else. A second voice. Faint, inhuman. Not a sound we make, more like pressure wrapped in language. But by a space? That's what it felt like. But I didn't tell anyone, not at first. Then, a few weeks later, I met someone, Jonah Littlebear, a tribal ranger about my age, worked the southern range. He'd heard about Croft too, and when I showed him a photo I'd taken on a hike, just a stone carving I thought was interesting, he went pale. The carving was a perfect circle, about a foot across, etched into the canyon wall. Around it, 8 jagged marks, pointing inward like claws. The stone was scorched around the edges. Not burned, just changed, as if the rock had been rewired. Jonah told me to delete the photo, told me to pretend I never saw it. I asked him why. He just said, "That's not for you. That's not for anyone. That's what they buried before they buried time itself." Then he told me a story. One I'm not even sure he was supposed to share. He said when he was a kid, his grandfather used to take him out into the mesas. They'd sit at night and listen. Not talk, just listen. And sometimes, in certain canyons, if you sat still long enough, you'd hear the earth humming. A low vibration, like wind through a closed throat. But this wasn't wind. His grandfather called it the deep breath. Said it was the sound of the old things waiting beneath the desert. Things that weren't gods, weren't spirits, weren't even alive the way we understand it. But they moved. slowly, thoughtlessly, like memory turned to stone. Jonah said the elders used to tell a cautionary tale, never written down, only spoken once, to the generation that needed it. A story about what happens when the land remembers too much. They said there was a time before language, before skinwalkers, before shape. And in that time, something was sealed beneath the canyons, not to be destroyed, because it couldn't be, but to be forgotten. Croft found references to it in fragments, half-sentences buried under centuries of translation, not in the words themselves, but in what the tribes refused to speak aloud. An absence, a hole in the record, and he made the mistake of chasing that absence. Jonah said Croft went looking in the wrong season, that the rocks are more awake in winter. He said Croft found the cave the old men never point to, that he went inside, and that no one who enters that place comes back with the same shape. Then he said something I can't forget. He said, "There's no warning when it finds you. No roar, no echo. You just stop being you." I asked Jonah why he was telling me all this. Why me? He said, "Because you listened to the tape." And that's when I realized this wasn't a story passed down to scare children. It wasn't mythology. It wasn't folklore. It was a warning system. And I'd just tripped it. Since then, things have been different. My radio picks up voices on frequencies we don't use, equipment into the cliffs, openings that breathe. And when I wake, I swear I hear sand shifting just outside my window. This is only the beginning. What I've learned since that tape, what I've seen since then, skinwalkers were just the surface. What's beneath them is older, quieter. It doesn't need to chase you. It waits. And when it finds you, you won't even know what part of you it took. If you're still watching, still listening, this is MindFuel, and this is the story they tried to bury. There are 6 more pieces to this, each worse than the last. You'll want to stop, but you won't. Subscribe and don't listen alone. After Jonah told me what he did, I stopped going mere devil's backbone. I stopped asking questions about Dr. Croft. I thought that would be the end of it. But you don't walk away from this kind of knowledge. It follows. It changes shape. It waits until your guard drops. And then it reminds you it's still here, watching, listening. The next piece of this story didn't come from the canyons. It came from a man I barely knew, a private surveyor named Rick Ellison, contracted by the Bureau of Land Management for a zoning operation outside the Zuni Reservation. This was mid-2021. Dry season. Heat over 100 by noon. Rick was stationed out by Carrizo Wash, mapping the terrain for a potential energy project. The kind of job no one really wants, but it pays well if you don't mind being alone for long stretches. The day it happened, he called me. Not dispatch, not local authorities, me. His voice was shaking, not scared, fractured, like the words were falling out of his mouth too fast for him to catch them. I could hear the sound of his pen scratching paper in the background, writing non-stop. He said, "I touched the red stone. I didn't mean to. It wasn't even marked on the site map, but it saw me." I asked what he was talking about. He said it again, slower this time. "I touched it and now I can't stop confessing." I thought he was joking. Sunstroke, maybe. Isolation, it happens. You start to unravel when you're out there too long. But this was different. He kept saying things, out loud, things he claimed he never did. He said he cheated on his wife, even though he never married. He said he took money from a foundation he'd never worked for. He said he buried a girl in the woods behind his childhood home, then said he never even lived near woods. It wasn't rambling. It was as if something was pulling these thoughts from him, testing him, seeing what stuck. He said, "I know they're lies, but they feel true. Every time I say one, I remember it, like it actually happened, like I lived it." Then he started crying, said he couldn't tell the difference anymore. I drove out there, 3 hours. I found him slumped beside his truck, notebook in his lap, pages soaked in sweat, thousands of words, some written backward, some scratched through so violently the paper tore. He looked up at me and said, "Don't lie, don't say anything that isn't true, it knows." That's when I saw the stone. It was about 30 feet away, towering, red, almost black at the edges, veined like muscle. Rick had flagged it on his GPS, but when I looked later, the coordinates had been erased. Not corrupted, erased, like it never existed. The stone was warm, even in the shade, and around its base, there was something else. Dark streaks, like old rust, but thick, organic. It looked like blood. I didn't want to believe it, but the smell, it was iron, not from a fresh cut, old. Most people wouldn't speak about it. Some wouldn't even let me finish the question. But one old woman at the trading post, Zuni name withheld, she told me just 4 words before turning her back. "By day, it listens." That's all she said. Later that night, I found the second part carved into a trail sign that had been torn out and laid against my truck door like an offering. "By night, it judges." I did some digging after that, quietly. There are records, not official ones, stories passed mouth to mouth. The Zuni call it the mirror spirit. It doesn't see your truth. It reflects your guilt, not the things you've done, but the things you've buried so deep you're not even sure they're yours. Doubt, fear, regret. It holds them up to you until you believe them. One tribal elder once described it like this: "It doesn't punish you for what you've done. It punishes you for what you might have done if the moment had come." It's not memory, it's a copy of your shadow. Rick spent 3 days in a VA psych unit. He checked himself out, vanished, left a note behind that just said, "Nothing in me is mine." That red stone is still out there. No fence, no warning sign. People walk right by it every season and never feel a thing, but every so often, someone touches it. Someone speaks near it and tells a lie, even a small one. "I'm fine, I'll be okay, it's not that bad." And then the bleeding begins, not from the stone, but from the mind. You know what the worst part is? I went back a few months ago. I shouldn't have, but I did. I kept thinking about what Rick said, about remembering things he never did, about guilt with no crime, and I needed to know if it was real, if it was really that powerful. I walked toward the stone. I didn't touch it, but I stood close enough to see my reflection in the heat shimmer. And I remembered something I'm still not sure was real. A boy, maybe 6, face down in water. Creek behind my grandfather's land. I was standing on the bank, frozen, not moving, just watching the body float. But I never had a brother, never knew a boy like that, never went to that creek. So why could I see it so clearly? Why did I start to feel like I let it happen? I turned and left, fast. My boots were soaked when I got back to the truck, but there hadn't been water for miles. I didn't tell anyone, until now. Whatever lives in that stone, whatever waits inside it, it doesn't kill. It doesn't even speak. It just shows you the shape of the thing behind your eyes. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to question what's real and what's imagined, what's memory and what's planted. You start to ask, did I ever even have a choice? That's what this story is about. Not creatures with claws, but the slow infection of doubt, the corrosion of your own certainty, until you're just a vessel for something else. This is MindFuel. And there are certain stories you hear as a ranger that live with you long after your shift ends. Campfire things, sure. Ghost lights, strange animal tracks, an extra shadow where there shouldn't be. You learn to sort them into piles. Imagination, misidentification, loneliness. But some stories, they don't go in piles. They don't end. Some stories hang in the air like heat, heavy, waiting. This one started in 1987. Northern Arizona, just outside Second Mesa. A Hopi ceremony was being held, private, closed to outsiders, as it should be. I won't say the name of the ritual out of respect, but it was meant to mark a transition, a moving from one stage of life to another. For for the community, for the individual. One of the children involved was a boy named Tovina, 9 years old, small for his age, bright, the kind of kid who asked too many questions, who remembered everything you said. He was chosen to carry a ceremonial bundle, feathers, stones, cedar bark, along a sacred path from the mesa to a marked circle. A journey of maybe 100 yards. They do it in silence, always in silence. But Tovina never made it to the circle. The last 2 people who saw him were elders. They swore to their final days that the boy never ran, never turned back. He simply rose, silently, without wind, without sound, as if something had unhooked gravity, as if the ground forgot it owned him. 1 second he was walking. The next, his feet were off the earth. They said he didn't flail, didn't scream, just tilted his head back and disappeared into the sky like a thread being pulled through a needle. And then he was gone. No body, no trace, no answers. They searched. Days, weeks, even months. The mesa was closed off. Every cave, cliff, and canyon combed. Nothing. Official reports listed as a disappearance, one of many. But off the record, the community knew better, and they stopped performing that particular ritual. Just stopped. No explanation. It was as if the very act of remembering was dangerous. That's where the story should have ended, but it didn't. 31 years later, 2018, I was sent to investigate an unauthorized campsite reported deep in the Ponderosa stretch, just north of Keams Canyon. Not unusual. Hikers go off trail all the time. What was strange was the complaint itself. A father and son had been camping near the ridge when they claimed to hear a child's voice calling down from the tree canopy above them. Not from behind, not from the trail, above. They described it the same way, separately. A calm, steady voice, young, maybe 9, 10 years old. "I can see you. I remember your name." They both heard it, but the father said something else that still sticks in my throat. He said the boy's voice came first, but underneath it, something else was just standard surveillance, nothing fancy. I sent it up above the canopy, just to scan for signs of people, maybe a lost kid playing tricks. I didn't see anything, but the drone's audio picked up something wrong. At first, it was just wind, pine branches rubbing. Then, about 6 minutes into the flight, faint. So faint you wouldn't hear it unless you were listening for it. A voice, high, clear. "I can see you." Then, "I remember your name." And then, under it, something else. The same sentence, but reversed. The same rhythm, same syllables. Only it wasn't English. And it wasn't just backward, it was inverted. We had the audio analyzed by a linguist familiar with the Hopi language. They confirmed a base language was Hopi, but twisted. Reversed phonetically, structurally, not gibberish. Intelligible, but only when flipped. The translated phrase was unsettling. It wasn't just, "I remember your name." It was, "Your name remembers you." That distinction matters. You see, there's a belief, one shared across many indigenous cultures, that names carry power. That to name something is to invite it. That to be named is to be claimed. But to have your name remember you? That suggests something older than claiming. It suggests a bond you never agreed to. A binding that predates you. When I played the recording for an elder, he didn't ask for a copy. He didn't ask where it was recorded. He just said, "Turn it off." Then he looked at me and said, "Some things rise to remind us the sky is not empty." I've never forgotten that. There's one last thing. 3 months later, I got a call from a botanist working with an ecological study near that same forest. She had installed audio sensors to monitor bird migrations. One of them malfunctioned, started recording for hours at a time without trigger. When she checked the files, she found whispers, hundreds of them, most indecipherable. But one phrase, repeated again and again, always in that same childlike tone. "I want to come down. I don't know how." I didn't tell her about the other recordings, or about Tovana, or about the drone. I just filed the audio and let it be. But sometimes I wonder if whatever rose in 1987 wasn't taken, but changed. If the sky didn't just lift him, but reshaped him, pulled something from him, or put something in. And if that's true, then what's calling down to us now isn't a boy. Not anymore. It's a voice wrapped in a memory, a shape inside a name. And once you hear it, once you recognize it, it knows you. It follows. This is MindFuel, and this is Chapter 2. If you're still here, keep watching. But next time you hear your name from above you, don't look up. Because whatever's up there is already looking back. I used to believe that water held memory, that lakes remember what's left in them, boots, bones, breath. But that memory was passive, like silt settling at the bottom of a still pond. What I've come to understand is far worse. Water doesn't just remember, it calls back. Lake Oahe runs deep, over 200 feet in some places, cold year-round. Flat as glass when the wind dies. If you've never seen it, you'd think it was calm, peaceful even. But there's something beneath it. Something that doesn't just wait. It sings. This next story didn't start with me. It came from a man named Julian Two Feathers. Sue, former military diver, then search and recovery. Spent more time beneath the surface than above it. He told me this in confidence after hearing about the Bleeding Stone incident. Said he didn't know why, but he thought I'd understand. This was back in 2009, early spring. The lake was still too cold for tourists, but a fishing boat had capsized during a sudden squall. 3 occupants. Only 2 were found. They sent in divers. Julian was one of them. Visibility was near zero. Mud plumes, sharp drop-offs, cold that claws into your chest. He said the lake felt wrong, like the pressure wasn't just physical, like something was watching from all sides but wouldn't let itself be seen. He descended to around 80 feet near the old river channel. Then he heard it. Not over the radio, not through vibration. He heard it. His sister's voice, calling his name, clear, calm, floating through the dark like a lullaby. Thing is, his sister had died years earlier. Car accident, single vehicle. He'd never told anyone how much he blamed himself. But the voice was hers, exactly. Even the way she pronounced his name, the small lilt at the end, like it had been pulled straight from his memory. He said it was so perfect, he almost took out his regulator just to speak. Then he saw it. At first it looked like a wall of shadow below him, a void darker than the water. But then it moved, just slightly, and something opened. An eye, not a metaphor, not a hallucination. An eye the size of a truck, lidded in stone-colored flesh, ridged like shale. No iris, just depth. Endless, colorless depth. It looked past him, through him, and then he heard a second voice, deeper, breathless, a whisper that filled his helmet and froze his limbs. It said, "You don't have to be cold anymore." Then again, "You don't have to be alone." Julian surfaced hard, nearly gave himself an embolism. They grounded him after that. Said it was nitrogen narcosis, decompression sickness, but he knew better. He said that thing didn't just mimic his sister's voice, it used it like bait, like a lure. It fished him from the inside out. Weeks later, one of the other divers, Brent Callahan, went missing. Routine solo sweep, calm water, disappeared. Then, "I'll come closer." There was no struggle, no distress, just a sigh, and then static. They never found his body. The tribes around Lake Oahe have a name for it, not spoken often, and never at night. They say it's a mimic, an echo spirit, not a ghost, not a monster, something that rises when the drowned are restless. It doesn't eat, it doesn't rage, it just copies. It waits beneath the surface and learns the shape of your loss, the sound of what you miss most, and when it knows enough, it calls you home. Julian believes the thing doesn't just whisper to you, It offers you something. He called it the warmth, but he said it's not comfort, it's surrender. It's a trick. The warmth it promises isn't healing, it's decay. The peace it gives is forgetting. After he told me all this, he said he's never gone near water again. Not lakes, not rivers, not even the bathtub. He showers quick, eyes open, and says the drain sometimes whistles back. I laughed when he said that, but only once. Because later that week, I got a voicemail. No caller ID, just static and one line. You don't have to be alone. I hadn't told anyone about Julian's story yet. I still don't know if it was a prank or if something had started listening to me. But I think about it now, every time I look out over still water, every time I hear a breeze pass over a lake and think it sounds too much like breathing. You ever heard someone call your name and felt a pull in your chest? Not fear, not joy, something in between? That's what it uses. It doesn't chase you, it doesn't drag you, it invites you. And the moment you answer, it already knows what to say next. This is MindFuel, and this is Chapter 3. If you've come this far, maybe you've heard it too. The hush just beneath the ripple. The voice under the voice. If you ever hear it again, don't answer, because it's still waiting, and it remembers who you love. Would you like to continue with Chapter 4? There's a moment, if you work this land long enough, when you stop thinking in terms of real and unreal. You start thinking in terms of seen and unseen. What's hidden isn't always gone. Sometimes it's standing just outside your line of sight, waiting for you to blink. This next account didn't come to me through a report or an official channel. It was passed down, quietly, from someone who didn't want to be remembered. A Navajo man. I never knew his real name, just the one he used when he came to the station that day, looking over his shoulder like something was still following him. He called himself Shale. He had tattoos. Not prison ink, not vanity. These were different. Traditional, precise, sacred. Lines of meaning, each mark placed with intention, with memory. Across his arms, chest, up his neck. A living story told in pigment. He asked me one question. What happens when the reflection doesn't look away anymore? I didn't know what he meant. Not yet. Shale had been staying on land near Black Mesa, family property, miles from any paved road. Remote. No lights, no signal. He'd gone there to fast, to be alone, to reconnect after something he wouldn't talk about. He mentioned a broken promise. That's all. Said he'd sworn something once and failed to keep it. And ever since, things had changed. It started with feeling watched. That's not rare out here. Big Sky Country can do that, but this was different. He said it wasn't just that he felt watched, it was where he felt it, behind glass, windows, mirrors, still water, anything with a reflection. But the thing watching him wasn't just imitating, it was studying. And then it stepped out. He saw it at night first. Just past the tree line, standing still, too still. No sway, no shift. And it was wearing something strange, something familiar. His tattoos. All of them. Only reversed, as if mirrored. Each line and curve flipped from left to right. A perfect inverse of his body. Not a twin, not a double. A reversal. He thought it was a trick at first. Shadows, someone playing games. But dogs wouldn't go near it. His uncle's cattle panicked when it came close, even when it didn't move. He watched a shadow curve around its body unnaturally, like light didn't want to touch it directly, like the land itself was refusing it. He tried to speak to it once, stood in the dark with a flashlight shaking in his hand and shouted, "What do you want?" It didn't answer. It raised its hand, his hand, mirrored, and tapped 2 fingers to its chest. Right where the heart would be. Then it tapped the same spot on him and smiled. He left the next morning, came down off the mesa, stayed with a cousin in Gallup. But it followed. Not the being itself, but signs of it. Reflections that moved wrong, windows that turned dark when they... That's when he came to me, told me everything, begged me to write it down, to remember it, because he said he was forgetting who he was, forgetting what the tattoos even meant. The stories were fading, and when they were gone, he thought the thing would take his place. I believed him. You would have too. His voice had no tremble, no hesitation, just a hollow weight, like someone who'd been marked and knew there was no coming back. He left that night, said he had to go back to the land, that if it was a punishment, he had to face it where the oath was broken. No one saw him again. 2 weeks later, a hiker found something in a juniper grove near the mesa. Skin, human, stretched, clean, and nailed to a tree. It was intact, fully intact, like a suit, as if someone had stepped out of it without tearing a seam. The skin bore the same tattoos, every line, every mark. Only now, they were all reversed. Authorities never confirmed identity, no DNA results released, no official statement. It was buried quietly, but I got there first. I saw it, and I swear to you, the skin was still warm. An elder I trust told me what he believed it was. A reflection made flesh, born when a sacred oath is broken, not through violence, but neglect. When you abandon what gives you identity, something else steps forward to take your place. Something old, something that remembers what you forgot. He said, the painted man isn't just a punishment, he's a replacement. I think about that a lot now. When I look into mirrors and see my face, but feel like I'm watching someone else watch me. When my reflection doesn't blink quite right. When shadows in my home fall just slightly off. I haven't forgotten my name, not yet. But some nights, I feel it slipping, like sand through fingers. If you ever break a promise that was made in blood, made in spirit, don't just apologize. Don't move on. Because something might be waiting to wear your skin like a story. This is MindFuel, and this was Chapter 4. If you're still watching, look away from your reflection, just for a while. Because if it ever smiles without you, it's already too late. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 5? Some trees grow in places you don't question. You don't ask why they're there or how long they've stood. You just let them be. That's how it was with the elder tree on Cherokee land, near the edge of what's now called Red Hollow. You could see it from the ridgeline, a single towering column of twisted ash-gray bark rising above the canopy like it didn't belong to the same world. The locals called it the listening tree. No one built near it. No one camped under it. Hunters wouldn't track past it. Kids were warned, not with stories, but with silence. You don't speak near the tree, they said, not because it hears, but because it keeps. For generations, the belief was that the tree didn't just listen, it remembered. Every word ever spoken within earshot, every whispered fear, every prayer, every lie. It absorbed them like water through roots. The longer it stood, the more it held. And then, someone cut it down. His name was David Clark, a logger, outsider, contracted through a timber company that didn't bother with the local warnings. Money changed hands. Boundaries were redrawn. And David, he was just the guy with the saw. He felled it in under an hour. Witnesses say it didn't fall like a tree, no groan, no splintering roar. It just collapsed, like it had been pretending to stand. Afterward, David took the job money and went home. A modest house near the edge of town, wife and 2 daughters. Good man, by all accounts. Honest. The kind of guy who left his boots by the door and never missed a Sunday. 3 days later, the voices started. At first, it was his voice, coming from the corners of the house. Not the center, not the hallway, always the edges, soft, like mumbling through a wall. His wife heard it first. He'd be sitting at the kitchen table, silent, drinking coffee, when his voice would come from the back pantry, whispering. Then it was the daughters. They'd hear him from their closets at night, saying things he never said. Sometimes prayers, sometimes questions, sometimes just breathing. They tried to laugh it off, called it stress. But then, one night, David's wife woke to find him standing in the hallway, still asleep, eyes closed, mouth shut, and behind him, his own voice saying, "Don't let me back in." She turned the lights on. He collapsed, had no memory of it, no idea what she was talking about. Then the voice changed. It wasn't David's anymore. It started using voices none of them recognized. A woman, a child, a man with a stutter, all speaking through the same thin whisper from corners, vents, behind doors that should have stayed shut. The youngest daughter said she heard someone recite the alphabet backward while laughing. The elder daughter said someone kept saying, "You promised," in a tone that made her cry without knowing why. It was the neighbor who brought in the elder, an old Cherokee woman named Ada. Just walked through the house quietly, listened, touched the walls. Then she sat down and said, "It remembered every word ever spoken near it. Now it speaks them. But they're wrong." She explained it like this. The tree was a vessel, not haunted, not cursed, just full of voices, moments, pieces of people. Every secret confessed in its shade, every fight, every dream, every name. It wasn't malevolent, it was burdened. But when it was cut, all those voices, hundreds of years' worth, had nowhere to go, so they followed the one who let them out, the one who ended the remembering. Now they weren't repeating anymore. They were rebuilding, trying to shape something, a voice that never existed, a being made entirely of echoes, of us, a mimic with no center. The voices grew worse. They didn't just speak, they shifted. The same sentence spoken by 10 voices in sequence. David said it felt like someone was knocking inside his chest. He stopped sleeping, stopped speaking altogether. Said he didn't trust his own voice anymore. Said it sounded different, like someone was rehearsing it behind his teeth. The final night, the family fled the house. Took only what they could carry. They didn't look back. The next morning, the neighbors heard screaming. They found David in the woods behind the property, kneeling in the dirt, mouth open, eyes gone black. But the sound wasn't coming from him. It was coming through him. They say it wasn't one scream. It was hundreds, all stacked on top of each other. Children, elders, women, men, all screaming in unison through a single open mouth. And then it stopped. David fell, no pulse. But there was one final sound, caught on a neighbor's phone recording. Faint, nearly silent, under the wind. A voice, high and thin, saying, "Rootless now, we need new wood." I don't think the tree was ever just a tree. I think it was a boundary, a container. And when it fell, something ancient, something stitched together from our own forgotten words was let loose. They tried to burn the stump. It didn't burn, not really, just steamed. And every so often, someone walking through those woods says they hear something whispering from the stump. Not words, practicing words. Like a tongue learning how to be human again. I've started leaving my recorder on at night. Sometimes I play it back and hear my own voice saying things I don't remember saying. Sometimes it sounds like someone else entirely, but the cadence is mine. The pause, the breath, the shape of me. So I'm careful now. Careful what I say near trees. Careful what I whisper. Careful what promises I make when I think no one's listening. Because something always is. This is MindFuel. And this was Chapter 5. If you're still listening, speak softly tonight, and don't say anything you wouldn't want to be said back. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 6? I've come to believe silence is never empty. It isn't peace. It isn't absence. It's waiting. That belief began with a story I wasn't supposed to hear. A voice passed down through hesitation. A tribal historian who called me from a restricted number, gave no name, and spoke only once. He said, there was something we sealed so it wouldn't speak, but the ground doesn't forget the shape of a scream. That call led me to the old records, fragments, really. Scattered oral history, nothing in museums, nothing official. 7 tribes, separate languages, separate customs, but one shared act. A ceremonial sealing. No exact date, only long before the strangers came. Oral traditions from each tribe mention a common event, something described not as a battle, but as a containment, a consensus among elders. A pit was carved into stone. A spirit, if that's even the word, was placed inside, and its mouth was sewn shut, with human hair, not to silence it, but to stop it from teaching, because it wasn't screaming when they found it. It was speaking, softly, calmly, in voices that didn't belong to it, telling secrets it shouldn't have known, describing the dreams of children, finishing the prayers of elders, offering stories from places no living soul had ever been. And those who listened changed, not in body, but in language. They spoke in patterns that couldn't be traced to any root. They spoke in rhythms that bypassed meaning and went straight into feeling. They didn't forget who they were. They just stopped being able to say it. So the tribes worked together, for the first and only time. They hollowed the pit, layered it in ash and bone and old metal, and they bound the mouth of the thing, not shut but sealed. Its lips were not tied closed. They were sewn into each other, stitched again and again until the flesh twisted inwards, as if the mouth never existed. And then it was buried. 7 sacred stones placed atop it, one from each tribe, each marked with a sigil meaning unsaid, unlearned, unmade. And for generations, the pit slept. Until 2021. A private development company began preparing land near what used to be the convergence point of those 7 tribes. The original surveyors missed the markers, or ignored them. Concrete was poured, machines brought in, and on the 3rd day of digging, the pit cracked open. They didn't know what it was, just a cavity in the earth, wide and deep, but no bottom, not really. A perfect circle. No tools ever carved it. No machine could have made it. It simply was. Then the footage started surfacing. One security cam, night vision. It shows a worker, standing alone near the edge, staring into it, then slowly backing away, his mouth moving, fast, too fast, like trying to force out 1,000 words at once. But I wasn't going to upload this. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You've heard the 6 chapters. You followed the signs. You listened, even when you shouldn't have. And now you're hearing this because I failed. They were never just stories. They were instructions, warnings disguised as folklore, ritual disguised as narrative. That's why the elders were vague. That's why the names were forgotten. That's why the maps were burned. They weren't hiding history. They were hiding mechanisms. Because every time we remember one of these things, every time we speak it aloud or pass it on, we remake it. This started when I got a drive in the mail, unmarked, just labeled return. Inside were files from Dr. Alan Croft, things I never published, because I thought they were corrupted or fake. One sounded like chanting, but slowed down to a crawl. Another was just silence, 10 full minutes, except at the very end, it whispered my name. I hadn't said it. I hadn't recorded it. I hadn't even played the file out loud yet. It whispered anyway. This isn't folklore. It isn't tribal myth. This is the architecture beneath myth. This is what the stories were built to keep out. And I've broken that seal. The files are changing now. I try to play them back, and they repeat before I speak. Like my voice is just a memory they're copying. I deleted them. They came back. I burned the drive. They came back. The audio uploaded itself. I don't know who's listening anymore. I don't think it matters, because whatever this is, it doesn't need belief. It doesn't care if you understand. You're part of the system now, just by hearing it. Language is infection. The cadence is the carrier. I used to think skinwalkers were the threshold, the final warning, but they were just the shadows around the door. What was behind it never had a name. Only sound. Only silence shaped into meaning. And now, If this uploads, that means it's loose. That means it's inside the code. That means it heard you. It's listening to you now, too. Don't share this. Don't describe it. Don't think in its rhythm, because that's how it moves. That's how it learns. That's how it speaks you. New tongue, old root.